We're going to spend a lot of time when dealing with the scientific method, especially at the beginning of the year, in designing controlled experiments. And that whole idea of how you set up an experiment is just as important, if not more important, than the results. Because if you don't set it up right, it doesn't really matter what your results are. So let's talk about the different aspects of a controlled experiment. A controlled experiment is one in which you have control groups and experimental groups. And the control group basically acts as a baseline for comparison. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that in the two different groups, in this case a control group and an experimental group, one group, the control group, is kind of left alone in terms of the one thing we're studying, whereas the experimental group is where you're going to be changing something. So in this case, it looks like we have some plants. Maybe you're changing the amount of fertilizer or sunlight or water. So that's controlled experiment. I want to talk more about this idea of changing things. These things that we change, those are known as variables. And there are two really important terms that we'll use a lot that I want you to understand. Two really important different types of variables. The first one is the independent variable, which a lot of times we just abbreviate IV. You'll see that a lot, just IV, independent variable. This is the one variable that is changed or manipulated in the experiment. So if we think back to the plants on the previous one, if we were changing the amount of fertilizer that was given, that is the independent variable, the one thing you change. So the control group, you don't give it the independent variable, okay? Or you kind of keep it the baseline, the same, maybe no fertilizer. And then the experimental group, or you might have multiple experimental groups, you change the amount of fertilizer that's given. This leads us to our second variable, which is the dependent variable, which, you guessed it, is oftentimes abbreviated DV. The dependent variable is what we're measuring. So it's kind of the factor that we are most concerned with as scientists, what we're going to be writing down and recording. And the dependent variable is affected by the independent variable. So if we think about those plants, the dependent variable might be the plant height, for example. So you would measure the plant height each day and see if the amount of fertilizer that's given, or the independent variable, affects the height of the plant, the dependent variable. Now, everything else that you don't change, those are the constants. So all of the other potential variables that remain the same. So if you think about the plant experiment, could be the soil, the type of plant, sunlight, water, etc. All of those would have to be the same. Okay? And you change one thing. The one thing you change is our independent variable.